reports from the interest group and working group chairs. And the program is available on the wiki, which the link is also there on the slide if you'd like to follow along. Samvera Virtual Connect will be recorded, and information on how to view the recording will be sent out to the community email list and posted here after the event. Please, some housekeeping, please post questions in the Q&A feature, which is on the bottom of the screen of the Zoom. Time is tight, so we will be bumping you off if you go too long. So please take note of your time notifications in the chat box. We have a very tight schedule, so let's get on with it. First up is Andrew Woods talking to us about Fedora 4 updates.
Thanks, Karen. Let me get things set up here. All right, can everyone see the Fedora first slide? Great, thank you, got it. Hello all. I'm Andrew Woods, the Fedora Tech Lead / Fedora Tech Manager from DuraSpace, and I am happy to be here today. Really what I'd like to talk about are some of the things that have been going on with the Fedora project over the last 12 months, as well as to give a little bit of insight into what you might be able to expect over, say, for example, the next 12 months. But before going into the technical detail, I think it's worth noting that Fedora is a community project. It is completely supported by the community, and what you see here are DuraSpace members that support the Fedora project, and ultimately all of the use cases, all of the development, all of the testing, etc., comes out of the community. There are just 2 full-time staff members dedicated to Fedora, myself and David Wilcox, but otherwise all of the work comes out of the community. So thank you all for that. Additionally, we do have a group of Fedora committers, and although we maybe there's someone not muted, but although we certainly welcome contributions from anyone within the community, this group of committers are responsible for most of doing, for example, code reviews, and ultimately having commit rights for merging code into the code base. And I'll just note here that over the last 12 months, we have brought on 2 new committers, Danny Bernstein from DuraSpace, as well as Bethany Seeger from Amherst College. So kind of taking it up to the highest level, really what Fedora is doing, so it's worth revisiting sort of that concept, is laying the foundation of linked data infrastructure. But not just linked data infrastructure, but linked data infrastructure that has the sensibilities of this community around both access as well as preservation. And ultimately, we're doing that so that your repository can be a first-class citizen in the read-write web. So to further this notion of why are we doing this, ultimately each of our institutions have resources, web resources, digital resources that are valuable, and we want to expose those as broadly as possible on the web. So as we look forward into the future, it's important that we expose those resources in a way that's interconnected with other resources on the web, but doing so in a way that's machine readable, so that these connections between the riches in your repository that are connected to other repositories or other resources that are exposed on the web, that those connections and the assets behind those connections can be discovered and inferenced, and sort of additional meaning can be ascertained around those assets in a machine readable way. And something that this does is it breaks down the silos of our institutional collections and ties them more broadly to the rest of the resources that are on the web. I mean, obviously there are other benefits of sort of benefits and pitfalls of RDF. Notably, we have the flexibility now of having more schemaless modeling of metadata, etc. But at the highest level, really just trying to expose our digital assets on the web in machine readable ways. So some of the guiding principles around doing this, and there are many, but some of the top guiding principles are around durability. And here we're talking about both web durability, URIs, as well as the backend connecting with preservation systems and connecting your Fedora repository with broader preservation solutions. Additionally, data portability. I think it is very clear that software continues to evolve, and the applications that manage our data continue to evolve. And it's important that we build systems, and Fedora certainly tries to do this, that makes it easy to move your content through time, even in the context of changing applications. So this speaks to data portability, trying to make it as easy as possible to get resources into your repository, as well as get those resources out of your repository. And a part of this, obviously, is standardization. It's standardization of the APIs, it's standardization of the serializations of your data, which both helps with notions of data portability as well as interoperability, making sure that Fedora is designed to interact with the rest of your institutional ecosystem, as well as the broader ecosystem of the web. So sort of speaking of ecosystems, there has been a significant work that has gone into integrating Fedora with a number of systems in your institutional ecosystem, and maybe focusing here for the moment on the green cylinder, your Fedora repository, which is responsible for managing two types of resources. I have noted here RDF, which really are your objects or your web resources as exposed as RDF, as well as binaries. Although there is another pattern that's available of having Fedora manage your binaries external to the repository. And I think as time goes on and as our collections continue to grow into the petabyte and beyond range, it will make less and less sense over time to require us to move our binaries or move our digital assets when our application gets upgraded. So sort of with this in mind, Fedora has put models in place that enable you to basically reference content that's outside of your repository, external content, but also still provide services on top of that content. Also, I will note here that there are two primary ways through which components in the ecosystem interact with Fedora, and how ways that Fedora interacts with components in the ecosystem. And the first is through a RESTful HTTP API, and the second is noted here as sort of the radar waves, basically messaging or notifications that come out of Fedora, and those messages come out of Fedora anytime you do something with your repository that affects a change, like creating a resource or deleting a resource or modifying a resource. A message comes out, and we've done a lot of work of putting tooling around consuming these messages, and then doing any number of things like populating triple store, populating Solar, doing some external processing, maybe around derivative generation, this sort of thing. And I'll just sort of mention this APIX effort has basically, it provides a reverse proxy mechanism on top of Fedora. We tried to keep Fedora the scope of the responsibilities and the expectations around Fedora as slim and trim as possible. However, there are some folks in the community who wish Fedora did additional things, and some of these additional things, basically proxying requests coming into Fedora, maybe adding headers or kicking off to external services, maybe allowing for aggregated retrieval or ingest, etc., has been built into APIX. I will then sort of transition here to the view of you basically looking at this ecosystem maybe more from the view of the Samvera community, where a lot of these additional capabilities and integrations aren't necessarily used in the context of Samvera, although I think it's important that we all be aware of the various opportunities there for other integrations. But I would highlight, so Samvera has a fairly tightly scoped expectation and interaction with Fedora through its HTTP API. I don't think messaging is really used, at least from within Fedora, the Fedora level messaging within Samvera. However, there is active work within Samvera and the import-export capability, which basically allows shuffling your content in standardized ways, either using bags or just exported in straight RDF to the file system, to distributed digital preservation systems, AP Trust, DPIN, etc., or even to another Fedora repository. And sort of with this more limited view of Fedora, I think there's some opportunities. One is, since there are, I think, tightly scoped expectations that Samvera has on Fedora, we have the opportunity to really try to optimize those interactions. And I think the work that Valkyrie is doing to make very clear what those interactions are and what those expectations are will help us put a finer point on where optimization can take place. But on the flip side, being aware of these other integrations that Fedora does support as your maybe your use case grows, or basically use cases within your institution, it is helpful to know what the other opportunities are with integrating with your Fedora. There certainly are many institutions that have Samvera that support the Samvera, supports a number of use cases, but then there are other reasons for having other applications within the institution that want to interact with Fedora more directly. And so something that enables this clear interaction with components in the ecosystem and the broader web with Fedora is this notion of a Fedora API specification. And if, as you see linked off there, we released the initial public working draft of this specification just at the end of June. And what you'll see is basically there are 5 main components to that specification. And each of those 5 main components are associated with existing web standards. So for example, the CRUD operations, resource management, is aligned with linked data platform specification, or recommendation rather. Fedora is specifying the versioning interaction, springboarding off of Memento. Fedora supports authorization, which I think generally speaking, Samvera maybe has less of an interest in Fedora level authorization, although there are Samvera institutions that also have other applications that interact with Fedora and want to have sort of the same policies enforced, kind of regardless of if requests are coming from Samvera or from other applications. The notifications work, messaging, as well as fixity. So as it relates to moving this specification forward, the timeline is, as you see here, we put out the initial public working draft, and the expectation and the hope really is that we have a 4-month window, or we're hoping that within the next 4 months we get enough feedback that we can iterate on this working draft so that then we can put forth a candidate recommendation, something around November, and then ultimately to a full recommendation for the API specification shortly thereafter. There are some requirements for actually releasing this Fedora API specification recommendation. And one of them is that we require at least 2 implementations of the specification. And if there are more, that would be fantastic. And some of this effort is already showing up. There are a number of projects, Cavendish, Trellis, Derby, etc., as well as the current Fedora implementation. And I think the point here is that as we probably many of us know, if you try to create an abstraction or create a specification that's based or only has one implementation behind it, no matter how hard we try, ultimately that specification will be biased towards that one implementation. So by having multiple implementations, it verifies that the specification is really not biased in one direction or another. Additionally, we'd like to have at least 2 client frameworks. So it's kind of on the flip side, ensuring that the specification is workable from a client's perspective and is meeting client needs. Additionally, having a test compatibility suite, which ultimately, if an application shows up that says I do the specification, I do the Fedora specification, this test compatibility suite basically verifies that. And sort of requirement by requirement or line item by line item within the specification verifies that a given implementation complies with the specification to whatever degree, 80% or 100% or whatever. And then obviously before we put out the final recommendation, we need to make sure that there are no critical unresolved issues. So looking over the last 12 months in terms of releases, I'll talk a little bit about releases here in just a second, but beforehand, laying a little bit of background, and probably most of you know this already, but semantic versioning is something that Fedora has not fully embraced, but will be, or actually has just somewhat recently embraced. And basically what this is when you release software, that the version actually means something. So the first digit represents the major version, the middle digit, the minor version, and the last digit, the patch version. So in this example here, the major version is 8, the minor version is 1, and the patch version is 3. And what each of these numbers mean is that for a major version, to 8 in this case, it signifies, and if we increment that to 9, it signifies that this release has some incompatible changes in it. In the context of Fedora, would have like API changes that require clients to be updated, and maybe on the back end requires a data migration. Additionally, both minor and patch releases are backwards compatible, sort of drop-in compatible. A minor release just has new features, but and the patch release is basically just bug fixes. So here is sort of an issue that we've seen in the Fedora community as it relates to semantic versioning and as it relates to the branding of Fedora and therefore kind of the release numbers that you've seen. And so you're probably all aware there's this initiative called Fedora 4, and really that branding of Fedora 4 was meant to distinguish the effort and sort of the re-architecting of the software, different from the previous 3.x line. Unfortunately, a result there is that all of our versions were sort of it kind of had an impact on the actual version numbers of any given release. So over the last 12 months, you see the releases here, and actually 2 of them were major releases. The 4.6 and 4.7 were major releases in that they had, one had a requirement for making a data migration in the back and then on the back end, and then the other one had some API changes, minor, but API changes that were breaking nonetheless. So So basically, the branding conflicted with our ability to do semantic versioning. So basically, what I'm raising here is that Fedora will be you'll be seeing semantic versioning being put into place in the sense that when a major release comes out, it will be 5 dot and then subsequently 6 dot, and then we will have minor releases and patch releases as noted in semantic versioning. So here's the policy, just kind of reiterating. We will be using semantic versioning in order to mitigate a lot of shuffle or client changes. We commit to making no more than 1 major release per year, and then doing minor and patch releases as required. So looking ahead, basically, sort of as you probably gleaned from the slides, there's a lot of focus on standardization, finalizing the API specification, putting out an initial release of that as a specification recommendation, the compatibility test suite, and then migration tooling, basically upgrade tooling to help folks move from one major version to the next. There is a delta between the Fedora software right now and the API specification, and so that delta will represent a major release because there will be API changes, and so what you'll be seeing in the relatively short term is a 5.0.0 initial release as we align with the specification. So don't be scared when you see 5.0.0 Fedora. That change is just a normal major release as opposed to an enormous release that we kind of saw between 3.x and 4.x. And then additionally, with the API specification, we are encouraging folks in the community to develop their own implementations of that specification. And along those lines, we will be assessing and evaluating those implementations, seeing which ones are best suited for which use cases, and then as implementations emerge that show promise, we will rally support around the implementations that would be more broadly valuable to the community. I mean, certainly there will always be a canonical version of Fedora that when you go to the website you can download, and that's the version of Fedora. But if there are other implementations that are well suited for other use cases, we will try to rally community support around those. And sort of in summary, you have the slides, so you can look at this at your leisure, but just noting that there are some training opportunities. We have a joint Samvera Fedora camp at Oxford, as well as a Fedora camp at UT Austin coming up this fall. Some links to the project websites, and thanks for the slides from Slides Carnival. And I think I will end with that. So if there are any questions, or if we want to sort of proceed with the program.
I'm going to give everybody 30 seconds to post questions in the Q&A. And if not, then we will proceed with the next presentation. There's a question. Moving forward with major versions, any thoughts to older clients saying, I speak 8 and carrying that legacy forward? Allows end users to upgrade Fedora and upgrade the clients as time permits.
I'm actually looking for that question.
It's in the Q&A.
The Q&A.
Do you want to answer by text, or you could answer live, either one?
Yeah, well, I just pulled up the Q&A, so just yeah, give me a look. Maybe I'll give it more thought as typing it in, but just trying to get to the essence of the question here. So older clients that speak maybe a different version of Fedora, carrying that legacy forward. Yeah, I wish, I guess there's no possibility for allowing John to speak here.
I'm not sure. Chrissy, can you let an attendee speak or no?
Yes, I can promote him.
We do only have 3 minutes left.
Yeah.
Does
Do you want me to go ahead and do that?
Sure, if John, you're in a position or interested in elaborating.
I think we're quickly running out of time.
All right, well.
So,
John should be there and able to speak now.
Good morning.
Hey, John.
So, oh boy, I apologize for this. This is going to be fun. We're in a conference room and we're trying to minimize the feedback. So we've muted our side. Anyway, just, going forward, when the major version changes, if you can keep back one generation, obviously you don't want to carry legacy forward. So that way a client that speaks the previous one just says, I speak, in this instance, 8, and the Fedora's on 9, being able to regress that conversation, that API, so we can upgrade our clients on a more timely fashion.
So you're saying try to maintain backwards compatibility, at least like one version back, even in the context of a major release?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not sure the degree to which that's that. I mean, I guess it would be possible. But with the cost, and so I think ultimately maybe there's a broader community conversation here around the release policy of not doing more than one major release per year is designed towards mitigating sort of the churn on the client side. Kind of, I think what you're saying is broadening that window to effectively 2 years. Which is a possibility, but I think would not come without significant challenges.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we need to move on at the moment. We're at time. Thank you so much, Andrew, for your presentation. Any other questions that you might have, you can put them in the Q&A box and Andrew can answer them by text. Next up for a presentation is Mike Giarlo, speaking on a Hyrax update. Mike, it's your screen.
Okay, bear with me. Here we go. All right, I assume you can all see my slides, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. So, I'm Mike Giarlo. I work for Stanford University as the technical manager of the Hydra in a Box project, and I'm also the product owner for Hyrax. And I'll be talking with you all today about Hyrax. So here's an outline of what I'll be covering today. I've got about 25 minutes, and I plan to use maybe a little over half of that time. And I hope to leave a good amount of time for questions and discussion. So I'm going to talk about what Hyrax is, where it came from, what it does, what we've been doing since Hydra Connect, what's the current state, what are our goals, what's the roadmap look like, and how do you get involved. So what is Hyrax? Hyrax is a front end based on Samvera components, providing a user interface for common repository features. And it's based on Samvera community components. It offers the ability to create Portland Common Data Model based repository object types on demand, to deposit content via multiple configurable workflows, and to describe content with flexible metadata. And there are many optional features that may be turned on in the administrative dashboard or added through plugins. I'll talk more about those in a bit. Hyrax is based on Fedora 4, and soon I'll have to update that and say it's just based on Fedora greater than 3, and it's implemented as a Rails engine. So it's very often the base of your application. So let's talk about where Hyrax came from. Hyrax is the consolidation of two well-established Samvera community gems, those being Sophia and curation concerns, and it represents the convergence of a number of solutions that our community has worked on since about 2013, including Sophia and curation concerns, like I just mentioned, but also bringing together in that convergence Worthwhile and Curate, which are from the curation concerns lineage. So just want to take you back a little bit and talk about how we got to this point. So in 2016, the Architecture Working Group held a session at HydroConnect to discuss two white papers that the group drafted and circulated to the community in advance. One of those white papers was a proposal to merge Sophia and curation concerns together. The proposal to merge the gems was based on a number of factors, such as similarity of purpose between Sophia and curation concerns, a diminishing difference in the delta, a diminishing delta in the functionality provided by these gems, some amount of difficulty among developers navigating the very permeable boundary between the two gems, and also lack of available resources to maintain them as independent products. So at HydroConnect last year, there was a really well-attended session about the white papers in the big old lecture hall, RAB, at BPL. And the community discussion of this particular white paper was really rich and spirited, and it largely validated the costs and benefits that were highlighted in the white paper and surfaced some new concerns for us to be aware of. So ultimately, we came up with a plan to consolidate the two gems into a new gem and not merge them, but rather to consolidate them. And we ultimately named this new gem Hyrax. The plan to do the consolidation included information on the proposed mechanics for how to do the consolidation. It included a rationale for why we're doing it, a timeline, and a list of frequently asked questions. An early alpha version, 001 alpha of Hyrax, was made available in December of 2016, and very soon thereafter, in mid-December, the Haiku application switched from using Sophia 7 to using the Hyrax alpha and has been using it ever since. And for those of you unfamiliar with Haiku, that's the name of the repository application that was produced as part of the IMLS-funded and Samvera community-supported Hydra in a Box grant. The community has since done a significant amount of work on Hyrax, releasing the 1.x series and working towards the 2.x series. So that's where Hyrax came from. Now let's talk about what it does. So there's lots and lots of features. Many of these will look familiar because they're what Sophia and curation concerns do. Hyrax does them as well. Some of them are newer, and I'm going to be talking a little bit in depth about those new features in a slide that's coming up. And the ellipsis in that final bullet on the right-hand side says that that's not an exhaustive list. There is even more that Hyrax can do. So given that we get this question all the time, like, is Hyrax a DSpace thing or is it a content DM thing? So given that Hyrax has roots in both Sophia, which began its life way back in late 2012 as a tool for building self-deposit institutional repositories, and in curation concerns, which was more geared towards digital collections management. Like, what is Hyrax? Does it do everything? Well, no, it doesn't do everything. It does do a lot. And I wouldn't really say it's a DSpace or a content DM, despite the fact that there are folks migrating to it from both of those platforms. Looking over the Hydra in a Box project's design documents, which are available on the Samvera wiki, the team noticed that the needs expressed by the IR and digital collections management communities actually intersected quite strongly. So looking back at the last slide, many of these features were expressed as needs by both communities. So that's not to suggest there are no differences between these two large abstract use cases I've kind of hand-wavily characterized, but we think Hyrax is suitable for many use cases. And as we see more folks adopt Hyrax and develop plugins, et cetera, that the number of needs that Hyrax can fulfill is likely to grow somewhat. Since HydraConnect 2016, the community's been very busy, been cutting releases, developing new features, rolling out bug fixes, improving documentation, and testing. Release-wise, soon after Hyrax was born, we shared and discussed with the community a vision for how to help folks adopt Hyrax. Part of that vision was for cutting 2 releases in 2017. One as a bridge for Sophia users and one as a bridge for curation concerns users. And by bridge, I mean a documented, tested upgrade path. So after some discussion on community tech calls, we decided that the 1.x series would be the bridge for Sophia and the 2.x series would be the same for curation concerns. And we've made significant progress. The work is still ongoing. The 1.x series has so far included 1.00, which was yanked, which means it's no longer available because we cut it from the wrong branch. It happens. 1.0.1, which is the bridge release, the first bridge release for Sophia. 1.0.2, which was a bug fix release, and 1.0.3, which is going to come out tomorrow. And it's another bug fix release with a bunch of backports from the 2.x series. We've also put a lot of work into that 2.x series, which has not yet been released, but could be close to being released. I say that because we really need more input, specifically from more of the curation concerns adopters, to give us a better sense of how close the current master branch is to a releasable state for that bridge release. So keep an eye out for that. I've also been really busy doing feature work. Some of this feature work I'm going to talk about happened in Sophia and curation concerns, but I think it's all sufficiently new to cover today. So we added support for administrative sets, which is a kind of collection object to better organize and govern deposited works. We added a configurable workflow engine from the work that Notre Dame has done on Sippity to allow for many different kinds of workflows, and one that we're shipping with Hyrax is a mediated deposit workflow where there's one step of approval required. We finalized a new consolidated dashboard, bringing the Sophia admin dashboard together with the user dashboard, and it's role-based, so you see on that dashboard what you need to see depending on your role and abilities within the system. It also features a collapsible sidebar for improved workspace management. The administrator users can now configure site colors for the UI within the dashboard. There are dashboard widgets showing graphs of repository statistics for like user activity, repository growth over time, the number and status of repository objects. We've enhanced site internationalization, adding support for Spanish shortly after HydraConnect last year, and since then added Chinese, which was contributed by UC San Diego, thank you, and really recently added French, German, Italian, and Portuguese. So the UI is now translated into 7 languages. We've made some enhancements to descriptive metadata fields, including a new location field, which leverages the GeoNames API so that we can apply authorized forms of strings and back them with URIs. We aligned the metadata with writestatement.org or writestatements.org by adding a new required field for entering standardized write statements, which makes it easier for users to know how they can reuse and use repository works. There's what you see is what you get, or WYSIWYG editing of content blocks and entire pages from within the dashboard. So the about page, the help page, the terms of use, and the deposit agreement can all be tweaked right within the UI. And we've done an implementation of the resource sync API of both the resource list and change list variety. And that API has been tested by the folks at DPLA, and there's a blog post that I meant to link here, but I forgot. I can include that at a later time. It's very interesting and promising work, though. So documentation has been another big focus for folks. And when I say we and folks here, I'm really talking about the entire Samvera community. This isn't just like me or the Hydra in a Box team or Stanford. This is really us. That's what I mean. So the Samvera documentation working group has done great work here. I want to give them a big shout out here. They've taken on a huge chunk of work to improve and consolidate our technical docs. And you can see at that URL on this slide, you can see all the work they've been doing. And in addition, you can anticipate more of the Hyrax documentation to be updated and to move to this central development documentation site. So those who have been working on developing Hyrax have been tracking and contributing to this effort as we go. For testing, so as part of the Hydra in a Box project, we ran a beta test of Haiku in May and June of this year. And since Haiku is largely Hyrax, the testing that was done touched on a lot of the work that we've all been doing in Hyrax. We did 6 weeks of testing, both on the application and on the deployment scenarios. We had at least 58 folks from 34 institutions participate, and they gave feedback on the different methods of installation, but also they found a bunch of bugs and they requested new features. The institutions included representation from academic libraries, national libraries, consortia, community colleges, and research labs from 7 different countries. All in all, excluding feature requests, 167 new issues were created during those 6 weeks. And it's a bit of a rough statistic because that includes issues, all issues, not just ones from the beta test, but a big chunk of them were from the beta test. And of these, about half have already been closed. So we're seeing a lot of good response to the testing. So let's talk about what our goals are for Hyrax now. So the community is rallying around Hyrax, in my opinion, in a way that's unprecedented, at least since I've been part of this community. I joined back in late 2011, and there's a number of working groups and interest groups that are doing the heavy lifting here to make substantial improvements. I'd mention Valkyrie support here. So the Data Mapper Working Group has done really promising work on Valkyrie, which is a set of patterns that provide the ability to use swappable backends in our Samvera applications. They're super useful patterns, and Valkyrie will provide implementers more flexibility with how their repository data is handled. Love to see support for that worked on in Hyrax, and I think that's coming. Plugin interface and support. So the plugins working group, this is very important to make Hyrax work in a way that's configurable and extensible so that Hyrax doesn't need to do everything itself. In particular, I'm excited to see support for book concerns, GeoWorks, and I'm really excited to see the work that happens in Avalon 7 as it's decomposed into a set of Hyrax plugins and maybe some modules that go directly into Hyrax. I think these are specific areas of opportunity for us. More flexible collection support. The collection extensions working group, they're working to perhaps unify user collections and administrative sets, and also to provide support for new features such as nestable collections, which folks have been asking for in Hyrax for a long time. And so related to that, it's a goal for Hyrax to be an attractive migration target for folks wanting to move to it, or even perhaps join the Samvera community. The DSpace Samvera working interest group, has done impressive work here documenting the needs of DSpace users who are looking for a change and rolling those changes into the code base. that's been really great to see. Richer analytics support. The Hyrax Analytics Working Group is just getting started. Some of their goals include exposing more analytics in the UI and providing more configurability. Better testing. The repository management interest group is going to be doing some work to better document Hyrax feature interactions. So that's a document that already exists and folks have put a lot of work into it. And this document could be used as the basis for a testing script. So in parallel, this interest group has worked with Alicia Kozine of Data Curation Experts, or Kozine, sorry if I got that wrong, and others to start building a common Hyrax deployment that the community can work together to test. So we see this shared instance as valuable, not just for testing features, but also for doing user acceptance testing of releases and having UI UX folks and accessibility experts use the site for instance, accessibility audits and usability testing. And so higher quality releases are a goal that many of us have for Hyrax going forward. And now we'll have some infrastructure for pulling that off. Also, more community involvement with our ongoing software development. So as more institutions move to Hyrax, we're going to need more help developing and maintaining Hyrax as the demands placed upon it grow. So the Samvera community and the Samvera partners in particular will be working together to figure out how to resource this in a more distributed and better sustained way. One of the current barriers we face is the lack of a shared roadmap for Hyrax. So the community goals for Hyrax are pretty clear, but a list of goals does not make a roadmap. So what is the Hyrax roadmap? Well, I don't really know. That's kind of me asking you. The point I want to make here is that we don't really have a Hyrax roadmap because we haven't worked together to build one yet. And no one institution does own or should own the roadmap. So this was the topic that came up that at the Samvera partner meeting back in March at Stanford. The conversation centered on potential new models for our Samvera community framework, ones that would make clearer the role of partners in the work of our community and better organize our shared day-to-day development work oriented around the needs as expressed by Hyrax adopters. So, pardon the helicopter in the background. The conversation has continued about the roadmap and about partner roles among a subgroup of partners, and we've reported out on our progress in a few monthly partner calls. The current goal of that group is to have one or more potential new models for partners to review in advance of Samvera Connect in November. Drafting, managing, and executing the roadmap is a big part of this work, and I think I can speak for the group when I say that we're very excited by the prospect of better organizing how we work together. So also, a roadmap does not necessarily make for a sustainable open source community. Roadmaps are useful for aligning our efforts, but a roadmap is only of limited utility without a viable way for our community to travel that road together so that we can move in the same direction without leaving people behind, stranded on the road. So I want to talk about ways we can get involved. So you can get involved with the partner role decision-making group I just mentioned. You can talk to me about that or to Sonia Betts at University of Alberta. The work is, if you want to lurk and just kind of see the conversation, that work is largely happening in the MAR 17 Partners Slack channel on the what is still called Hydra Slack. Another way to get involved is to join one of the working groups or interest groups that I mentioned earlier, who are very involved in the day-to-day work around Hyrax, or create your own working group or interest group if none of the current groups meet your needs. We need more than just development. We need documentation, we need testing, we need UI UX enhancements, we need metadata enhancements, etc. There are so many ways to get involved. There's also a current Hydra in a Box community development sprint going on. There have been months-long contributions made here by Indiana University and Notre Dame. Those are continuing, and we would welcome any folks that want to throw in. In addition, there will soon be Haiku sustainability work cycles. Currently, I'm thinking those will be planned for Q4 of this year through Q4 of next year. They're going to be oriented around Haiku, since we aim to sustain the work that this community began as part of our IMLS project. But as we've seen, work done on solution bundles and applications do serve as an engine for development and maintenance of Samvera components. So I see this as an effort to also better maintain Samvera. So put otherwise, most of the work that will be done during these work cycles will be on Hyrax and lower in the stack. So even if you're not a Haiku user, you may be interested in contributing to these work cycles as a way to better maintain our shared code. So stay tuned for more information there. Not doing this work alone, like I said, and I want to acknowledge all the work that other folks have done, including the resources that my employer, Stanford, has dedicated to community work, and acknowledging the important role that's been played by the IMLS. A number of institutions within our community have generously offered their own time and resources to do this work, and in many cases in multiple week and multiple month chunks. So I'd like to recognize these institutions for their contributions to Hyrax over the past year. And those would be California State University, Chemical Heritage Foundation, Columbia University, Cornell University, Co-Sector at the University of London, Data Curation Experts, DuraSpace, Indiana University, Northwestern University, Oregon State, Penn State, Princeton, Stanford, UC San Diego, UC Santa Barbara, University of Cincinnati, University of Michigan, Notre Dame, University of Virginia, University of York, and Virginia Tech. Thank you all for the work that you're doing to help us sustain this thing. And now I'll stop for questions. Thank you.
Mike, you have one question already in the question box. If you want to answer that by text, that would be great. We have about 2 minutes left, so if people would like to post more questions in the question box, and I think probably the best way to answer it, if you want to answer that first one live, we do have a couple minutes, but we're not going to do it back and forth.
Okay.
That makes sense.
So I would want to discuss. Well, let me answer the second question. I think the first part is probably worth more probing, but yeah, I would say that that Hyrax is ready for folks to build upon. I think the Hyrax 1 series has been very stable, and Hyrax 2, once we get it cut, should be stable, but it's currently not cut. So if you wanted to use the latest and greatest, you would have to use the master branch. But I would certainly say that's not the most stable way to do your development. But in the meantime, you can always jump to Hyrax 1, and a lot of work has already gone into defining what the Hyrax 1 to 2 upgrade path will look like.
Okay, we're just about at time, so why don't we move on? If people want to continue to ask questions, please put them in the question box, and Mike can answer them offline. Next up for our featured presentations is about Hyrax metadata, and Tom Johnson and Christina Harlow are going to speak.
Unmute myself. Hopefully you can hear me and see the slides. Let me check. Cool. Okay, so hi, I'm Christina. Tom, are you there?
I'm here.
Perfect. So we are going to be talking about practical approaches for migrating metadata to Hyrax, practical and metadata being the operative or maybe important words here. And thank you for having us today. We do have a link to the slides, although I do know that the slides are going to be shared out later by the organizers, which is really awesome of them. But in case you want to leave a comment or an edit or write some graffiti on our slides or do whatever, there is a bit.ly link to Hyrax data migration camel case, and you can get to these links and notes and all of that stuff. So today's facilitators, it's me and Tom. I'm Christina. Hi. I work on data operations for the Stanford Digital Library, our digital repository. Data operations is something we've sort of made up, but I'm really into it. So I'm happy to talk about it with y'all later if you have questions. And then you can also hit me up on Twitter. It's CM_Harlow. And Tom, do you want to introduce yourself really quickly?
Sure. So I'm a developer with Data Curation Experts, and also a PhD student at the University of Washington Information School, where I do some stuff in a place called the Data Lab. I'm here mostly with my DCE hat on.
Cool. Okay. And so So today we have 25 minutes, which means we're going to probably just be dumping a lot of information on you, but hopefully you can refer back to it later or ask us questions. But we have 25 minutes to go through these points. We want to help you get situated in understanding the sort of Hyrax metadata status quo, what currently comes with Hyrax to support your metadata needs. And it's good timing or good scheduling that we're following on Giarlo's great update on what Hyrax is. We want to give you some points and tips and ideas on where to start with planning your metadata migration. Some of these will not be specific to Hydra, but may be helpful to think of in context of having now that status quo in mind or that metadata profile that you're working towards. We're going to try to point out some questions, priorities, and gotchas to watch out for when moving to the Hyrax metadata profile, and point you to some helpful resources and communities, as well as ask you to engage with those communities as you learn through your own migrations. So those are our goals for today. Hopefully they align with what you guys would like to hear about. With that said, I'm going to hand it over to Tom to give the status quo. And Tom, you can just ping me when you want me to move the slides forward.
Thanks, Christina. So yeah, so I'm going to start off with the overview of what's going on in data-wise so far, and there are really this. One is the PCDM side, so that's going to be the structural stuff, and then the other side is what metadata Hyrax supports out of the box and how you can extend it. So, Christina.
I'm like your Vanna White. I'm so excited.
Yeah, this is gonna be fun. So thinking about the distinction between the PCDM side and the individual metadata side, I want to call out two different kinds of really overlapping things, but that represent two different activities. So there's object modeling, and then there's the application profile. So the object modeling is really the PCDM concern stuff. So what you want to think about in object modeling is what is the structure of the entities in your repository and how are they related to each other. The object modeling that we use in Hyrax and in PCDM is really pretty simple, and it's a sort of a generalized semantic model. And I'll say a little bit more about how PCDM is opinionated about how things are related. But the point I want to make here is just that you want to think of object modeling as a certain kind of early activity in your metadata work in Hyrax. The reason for that is that when you're doing object modeling, you are really kind of determining the overall structure of your data and how the software will handle it. The second concern is the application profile concern, where you want to be describing how your individual properties are hanging off of the objects in your object model. So this is where you're choosing predicates and where you're defining constraints on them, and providing the kind of both code and user-facing documentation that ensures that your data looks like the kinds of descriptions or has the pieces to make your application work well. So again, the object model is structural and has a big impact on the shape of the application, and the application profile is a little bit more implementation focused. Thanks, Christina. So PCDM and HydraWorks are the base kind of low-level model that Hyrax uses. So in PCDM, there's well, I guess first of all, PCDM is an object model that's intended for repository data use cases, and it's really intended to err on the side of being under rather than over prescriptive. So the goal is to get structural interoperability without really aggressive compliance requirements. So we really want, as a design goal, when we were working on PCDM, the focus was really on not over specifying. So with that in mind, the relations in PCDM are between three kinds of objects. Collection, which is really just scoped as any group of resources, and particularly any group of collections and objects. So in PCDM base, you get collections that are members of collections, and you get objects that are members of collections, and that's what a collection is. It's just a grouping of those things. An object is an intellectual entity, and you'll sometimes see the word work or digital object used. And I'll say more about the scoping of objects in a little bit. And then there's a file, which is a sequence of binary data. This is also in LDP space. This is the same thing as a non-RDF source. So PCDM is kind of based around the concept of membership between these things. Collections have member objects and collections, and objects have member files. And the main constraint is that files, which are the concrete data entities, again, are members of objects, and particularly each file is a member of exactly one object. In general, the objects are more abstract. HydraWorks extends this by breaking objects into two groups: works that are intellectually coherent things, and again, these are not to be confused with Ferber's concept of work, and I'll say more again about that. And then file sets, which are groups of files. So for example, an original and its derivatives, or a scan of a textual document and the OCR that's extracted from it. These are still objects in PCDM because they're too abstract to be files, but they're in the HydraWorks model. They're separated from things like books or pages that might be works. So why do we want to use shared low-level models like this? The reasons are really twofold. First, we want to understand the structure of each other's data. So even if our use cases are significantly different, we're still in the repository domain together, and we want to be able to transfer data structurally. So that's where PCDM and HydraWorks come in. And then you want to be able to develop software that handles the general cases that can be extended to handle specific cases. So software that handles PCDM, like Hydra PCDM, and then we extend that to handle this additional distinction between works and file sets, and so on down the line. Yeah, so go ahead and move to collections, Christina. So Mike mentioned in his presentation before that collections are in Hyrax right now just have objects as members. There's work ongoing to make collections nested, and hopefully that comes through. But collections in Hyrax are collections of objects, and then they have some metadata attached. And this is a good time to make the point that there's a distinction in the Hyrax implementation between what's core metadata and the metadata that ships out of the box but isn't core. So the core stuff is the metadata that is required application-wide. So all of the entities in the PCDM space need to have these four properties: title, depositor, date uploaded, date modified, for Hyrax to really work. And then additionally, Hyrax ships with this collection of basic metadata, which is really intended to cover all the kind of really low level use cases that Hyrax supports out of the box. So yeah, so a collection has the core metadata and the basic metadata mixed in, and it has objects as members, and that's really the whole thing. Thank you. And so next on the works model is a work, and a work is an intellectual entity. The example given in the actual description are the examples given in the actual description are books, films, dissertations. It might also be pages, really anything that is the actual thing that you're interested in describing as a repository object is likely a work in this model. And works have core and basic metadata mixed in, and then again, a work is a PCDM object.
Sorry, were you ready?
Yep, that's perfect. Okay. So next is a file set, which is a group of related files. A file set is also a PCDM object, and file sets and works are disjoint, so a work is not a file set. And then so you want to use file sets for groupings of objects that aren't really repository objects, like a scan text and its OCR again. File sets also have core and basic metadata mixed in. You might be noticing a pattern. The file set metadata is used for information about the group rather than any particular object or a file, and file sets may be members of more than one object. So last is a file, which is the binary data. This is the concrete thing that you're storing in the repository, and files are members of exactly one object again. And files also have metadata that is technical and administrative that hangs on a related node in code that's the metadata underscore node. And that Fedora creates this RDF source to manage the metadata for the file. And I've listed for you the kind of basic metadata that ships with file. So just quickly, that's the works model overview, and I just want to skip right over this, Christina, to save time. And this is also mostly for reference. This is a listing from the linked page of the basic metadata. So you have that, it's more complete. Again, this is relatively easily changed, and it's possible for you to not use it at all for works in particular. So it's frequent, given that the basic metadata is really, well, it's really basic. It's frequent that you're going to want to add something. So this is just a little sense of what the process that you might want to go through and what you might want to consider when adding a field. So I would suggest starting by looking for predicates that describe the correct thing, that express the relation that you're trying to get at. So select a predicate, and then you want to select an accessor name for use in code, and then you have this next concern, which is this a single or multi-value property? In the underlying RDF model, everything's multi-valued, and we enforce things like single value constraints in a couple of ways in Hyrax. First of all, we can specify them on the property, and that makes it so that single value object comes back as well, just one value rather than an array. And then we also have validations that can make it so that we can say things like there needs to just be one in an array. So thinking about how you want what your constraints are on the object. There's some documentation on the right-hand side for controlled vocabularies. And if you have a use case where you need to add a controlled vocabulary, it's possible to do that. Again, what are your constraints on this object or on this property? Is it required? Are there particular data types that you have in mind? Data types are handled natively in code, so there's no need to specify them in particular, but you may want to validate that the correct type is returned in various places in the code. And then lastly, I just want to mention ordering. In the general case, properties are not ordered, and that's a problem for some people in some cases. And I just want to put the bug in your ear that if you are dealing with ordering, then really consider whether you're modeling order or something else that is captured by the ordering. So yeah, this is just an example of custom properties. We can move right past it. And the last thing that I'll say is when you're doing custom modeling, share both the structure and the application profiles that you create. The example here is from the Geo Concerns group, and you can see that there's a certain amount of complexity in this case. Frequently modeling becomes a complex process, and it's valuable to spread development and maintenance labor around reusing saves work. And I think with that, I'll pass it back to Christina to talk about where to start in migration planning.
All right, thank you, Tom. So I think we got about 6 minutes left. Some of this I might go through a little bit quickly, but that's why we shared out the slides so that you could go and refer back to them later. So where to start in migrating to Hyrax? You might want to start some controlled fires. You might feel like you're in the middle of a forest fire. I thought that was an appropriate background image for this, but it's really going to be okay. I have a list of questions that I've sort of gathered over time when performing quite a few migrations. And I recommend just sitting with some of your key stakeholders or colleagues that you're going to be migrating this data with and whiteboarding out some of the answers to this. In particular, start thinking about what is it that you're describing. This is somewhat presumed for us in a lot of current repository systems. It's some sort of document. Well, the modeling in Hyrax allows you to expand that a bit. It allows you to think about more than just the first class of resources. Think about the relationships between the objects. You may have multiple profiles now. In particular, these quote-unquote complex objects should be more readily supported in your Hyrax metadata profile and modeling because of the flexible nature of it. Think about first-class resources, second-class resources, and context classes. This isn't going to be particularly important when you're thinking about how to handle things like agents, because now you could have those as a first-class resource if you wanted to. It would require some development work, but it is a way to think about your migration. Think about how you're going to handle external data. So often you'll see in some of the examples I'll show in a second, a lot of these document-oriented repository systems will have fields like author 1, author email 1, author first name 1, author 2, author email 2, author first name 2, et cetera, et cetera. Think about those groupings are now becoming those agent resources that have some sort of role or relationship to your repository work or your document. You may or may not want to have some way to do lookups for those, and the questioning authority gem within the Samvera community work is ACID supporting that. But it doesn't end just there. You have to think about where those lookups occur. If you're migrating your data, are you going to perform entity resolution, which is where you take all of those author fields that have strings and match them to identifiers and in the vocabularies that you want to perform lookups? What are you going to do about when you need to mint something new? Because I'm sure, as we all know, not all authorities, local or external, have all resources managed or captured in them. Start thinking about how your data is going to interact in that way. The modeling, sometimes we get a little bit lost in the theoretical idea of what it is we're describing and really going down rabbit holes of RDF modeling in particular. I like to keep this tightly coupled with, well, what is it that we're trying to support in our search and discovery interfaces? What aspects are quite important? What might be theoretically correct but too complex to support at this point? And then, yeah, think about who's adding the metadata and how realistic it is for them to go into multiple forms or down those theoretical rabbit holes. This gets to, sometimes it can be intimidating to start with just that PCDM model and those HydroWorks models and build out your repository ecosystem or your metadata migration target from that. So I like to flip the script there sometimes and start with, okay, well, let's see what we actually have in our current metadata. Let's do some analysis to figure out what fields have been added that we weren't expecting or that we weren't ready for. And we'll see some examples of that in a second. And I would implore you guys, because I've seen so many migrations just get stuck in the mud because of this, start to separate out what you need for your migration and what you need that are just enhancements that are made clear because you're getting ready for migration, and where those happen. The enhancements being coupled onto migrations of metadata sometimes makes the migration that much harder or that much opaque. So really begin to make a phased approach is my recommendation. And it's never going to be perfect, so be ready to iterate. So with that said, I really cannot emphasize enough, starting with assessment. Going to this new model, you have new ability to do all kinds of metadata support. Whatever tool you need, whatever scripts, just do something to figure out what actual data you have at present in your repository. And then go ahead and iterate or make that phased approach that I was mentioning before so that you can iterate on the expectations and your phases of work. So what I've got here is highlighted. We weren't ready to do, this is a migration to Fedora 4 and actually curation concerns. We weren't ready to do string lookup or entity resolution as part of the migration. So we found a way to have both string fields and identifier fields. This is not something we recommend, but we knew that it was part of our phased approach because we had to move the data over and then we wanted to perform the resolution in Fedora 4. That was a choice. It was clearly documented. Sorry, I'm going through
Christina, yeah, we're
at time.
Need to wrap up, like 30 seconds.
Okay, so I would also recommend understanding graceful degradation is where you have the underlying models that you can go to. Here are recommendations just from sources that I've personally migrated to and put my notes and gotchas there for you to watch out for. And then please do interact with your community. And here's a list of resources for where you can reach out to folks that can help you. And this is not a one-way process. Please share your experiences back as well. There we go. Sorry, we ran out of time, but migration is hard.
Yay, thank you so much. So if anybody has questions, please put them in the Q&A box and Tom and Christina will be sure to answer you offline. That would be great. We now have a 15-minute break, actually slightly less than 15 minutes, and I know that's really tight. So go take your bio break and grab some food and come back at 12:35 for a steering update from Richard Green. Thank you, everyone. Can everyone hear me, just as a test? Great. Okay, get started again in about 30 seconds or so. Okay, everybody, welcome back to Samvera Virtual Connect 2017. Next up is an update from steering by Richard Green. Richard, take it on.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone, or whatever time of day it is with you. My name's Richard Green. For those of you who don't know me, I was one of the founding members of what became Hydra and is now Samvera. And I've been asked to talk to you very briefly about what has been occupying the steering group over the last few months since last year's Hydra Connect, as it was. So 5 minutes, 5 headlines, basically. I want to talk briefly about the annual report that we've produced, mention a little bit about Hydra's finances, talk a bit about Hydra partnership and how we're adapting that slightly, talk about trademarking and flowing naturally from that into rebranding, because the one caused the other, as it were. So first of all, the annual report. Some of us had been thinking for quite a long time that Hydra had reached a level of maturity where an annual report might be useful. And we touted this idea around a little bit, and after a bit of consultation decided that we probably should do it. An annual report which would bring together all the community's achievements each year. 2 major purposes in mind, I think. Firstly, that it would be useful for convincing potential adopters management that we're a serious group with a serious product. Many other groups in our area of operations produce such a thing. But also because an awful lot goes on in our community, and we thought it would be a useful diary for ourselves to look back and see what we had achieved over the previous year. So around about last Christmas, we started putting this together, and we took a draft of it to the March Partners meeting in Stanford, and we then distributed that quite widely thereafter to various mailing lists. And if you haven't actually seen it, it's available from the Samvera wiki. It's also available on one of the menus of the new website. Moving on to finances. Last year was our first year of having DuraSpace as a fiscal sponsor. If you're not familiar with the idea, basically we needed a home for our legal and financial work, not least of all fundraising. If we were going to raise funds to help with the work that we all do, we needed to have somewhere to bank it, basically, in a legal and proper way. So DuraSpace agreed to do this for us. We signed up. The first year went very well, and we have relatively recently signed up with them for another year. We published the memorandum of understanding that we signed, but it became quite clear quite quickly that actually, because our financial year, Samvera's financial year, was different from DuraSpace's, that this was causing a bit of a problem. So we did some work to align the 2 financial years, modified the MOU slightly. And again, that MOU is available on the wiki if anyone wants to read it. And it's based now on a much better understanding than we originally had, I think, of what we wanted as an organization from DuraSpace as our fiscal sponsor, and indeed what it was going to take DuraSpace to provide us with that service. Last year, we undertook fundraising for the first time, as I mentioned a moment ago. And with some very generous partners in the community, put together something slightly over $60,000. We have plans to do the same this year. We have reached out to the people who contributed first time round, and have already got the best part of $55,000, as I understand it from them. But we do intend to reach out to a broader group than that, and that process was held up very much by the rebranding. Whizzing along quickly. Partnership, it was clear that people in the community were not really terribly happy with the way we were doing it. Particularly the idea of provisional partnership was causing confusion. And so we have simplified the process. Again, that new process is on the wiki, and we're working with the 2 or 3 institutions that are in this provisional partnership stage to move them to full partners. The other thing was, as Mike Giarlo mentioned in his presentation, that we put together a working group to help determine what the partners need from the community, and likewise what the community expects of partners, and that work is ongoing. Very quickly, because I know I'm running out of time. Many of you will know that Hydra was pursuing trademark status in the US, Canada, and Europe. We came across, around about Christmas, a German company with a long-standing call on the Hydra name. It goes back into the 90s. Although their interest was in factory automation software, they wouldn't agree to coexistence, and so they gave us 6 months to rebrand. But steering group decided this was an opportunity rather than a setback. It did mean that we had to put the Hydra website on hold, the new Hydra website. But we engaged with the community to come up with and then vote on possible new names. 4 of them came out of that process. A 5th was added after some ideas at the partner meeting in March. And from those, whittled down by various legal constraints and so on, we settled on Samvera, which is the Icelandic for togetherness, or being together. It's a nice idea which reinforces the notion of community, we thought. So we launched the new website earlier this month. The wiki's been rebranded, the mailing list have been renamed, and hopefully you will all have seen the output from that work. And just in case you're interested, yes, we are now trying to trademark Samvera, but hopefully it'll be a much easier path than it was with Hydra. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much, Richard. If anybody has any questions for Richard, can you post them in the Q&A? And we need to move on. Next up are the lightning talks. The first one is on Samvera, Willow, and RDM in Europe, and Richard Jones is giving that report. A very quick one.
Afternoon, everyone. Okay, hopefully I've done this right. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. Wonderful. Right, I will be as swift as I can, see if I can catch us up a minute or so. My name is Richard Jones. For those of you who don't know me, I'm with Cottage Labs. We're a software consultancy and service provider in the UK. And I'm going to talk to you a bit about what we're doing with Samvera, our product offering, which is Willow, and particularly research data management, and why that's important in Europe and why it's going to be important in Europe for Samvera. So first of all, I'm going to tell you about Samvera Europe, which is a group that we are part of, talk about RDM and something called the JISC RDSS framework, which is important for us in the UK. I'll tell you a little bit about our product Willow, and then how we're hoping that we're going to benefit the community from the stuff that we're doing on the continent. So first of all, Samvera Europe, I'm very pleased to be part of a group in Europe, including our colleagues Richard Green at Hull University, and all of these other people that I show you on the list here. We're primarily UK universities at the moment, but there's a couple of mainland Europe universities as well. And we can't officially say yet because we're still working on some contract stuff, but we're hoping that there'll be some more Samvera users in the UK very soon, so we'll be able to add those to the list. If there is anyone on the call who is in Europe and is using Samvera and is not on the Samvera Europe list, please come and join us. The presentation is in the shared folder, so you'll be able to get the links from there. There's a meeting coming up towards the end of this month as well, so 27th of July, so if you can come along, please do. Let me rapidly move on to why we care about research data management and how that relates to Samvera. In the UK particularly, there is increasing calls from our funders to do useful things with research data. what is on your screen at the moment is one of the requirements from EPSRC, who are a funder, for what they require from research data from UK institutions now. So research organisations will ensure that EPSRC funded research data is securely preserved for a minimum of 10 years from the date that any researcher's privileged access period expires, or if others have accessed the data, from the date on which access to the data was last requested by a third party. So take a moment to digest how intense that requirement is. That says you must preserve this data from 10 years from the last time someone looked at it, which is a fairly significant thing. And it threw a lot of universities into a scramble to do something about looking after research data. Now, this is at the extreme end of the scale, but this is the kind of thing that UK universities are now dealing with. So there's a big push on managing research data in the UK. To this end, JISC, who are a funding organisation, governmental body in the UK, have been pushing to build a shared service. The RDSS is the Research Data Shared Service. At the moment, it's in pilot, but they're basically looking to be able to support institutions to provide this kind of level of management of their research data. So they're looking at building a system, or actually a series of systems, to provide these services to higher education and to procure in services and consultancy to support that pilot. And that's essentially where we come in. So we're bringing a Samvera-based repository product to the RDSS framework, which will be available to UK institutions to use. What we're kind of up against in the UK, and from the perspective of our community, is there are 4 suppliers who are offering services to UK higher education through this framework. There's us with Willow. There's our friends at Islandora, and there are also 2 other offerings, Haplo, which you may not have come across outside of the UK. They're an open source software for managing a variety of different kinds of research information, and Figshare, which is the large proprietary offering from Digital Science. So we're sort of matched alongside all of those people in the UK. So that's a good position for us to be in, as a small company bringing an open source product to the market. We're already playing alongside the larger players in the UK. So what is it that we're bringing to the table here? So Willow is a collection of supported and integrated Samvera components. As you will all be very familiar, there are a lot of parts to Samvera. You don't necessarily need all of them to build your repository. Some pieces are more important than other pieces. What we've done is selected a couple of those pieces and put them together, and said, this is what we formally support. We will fully understand these pieces of software and how they integrate together, and we'll be able to do development on them for you. We'll be able to support and maintain and upgrade them for you. So really at the heart of it at the moment is Sophia. We are, of course, tracking Hyrax. We're already looking into upgrading from Sophia to Hyrax. And obviously, we're interested to see what happens with Haiku. And as was noted earlier, a lot of what is Haiku is in Hyrax. So hopefully, we'll be able to get quite a lot of benefit from moving to Hyrax in the medium term. We're also using Geo Blacklight, which I realise I've spelled incorrectly on my slide. And obviously, it's Fedora 4 in the back end, so we're not using Fedora 3. And one of the services people were quite interested in here was the image management, the image display. So we're looking at RIIIF to provide IIIF services to our users. We're also integrating with a variety of external modules, particularly the JISC message gateway, which is the mechanism through which a lot of integration will happen for the RDSS framework. We've been working with Archivematica for a little on and off for a little while. We're talking to people like Archivum, and there will be a variety of CRIS integrations as well that we'll need to do. On the top left there's something called Lodestone, the deposit tool. That's something we've written in-house, which allows you to deposit into a repository via Sword 2. And that will take me on to how we're going to contribute back to the community shortly. So this is a sort of marketing slide, I guess, for Willow. The whole point of Willow essentially is that we're doing a lot of integrations. We're looking to integrate with people's institutional box or Dropbox or OneDrive accounts. We're looking to integrate with their preservation systems. We're looking to integrate with their CRIS systems, and that's the sort of shape of the offering that we're putting forward. And that fits quite nicely into how the RDSS framework is structured. Because it's all about integrating these various different parts of the university's infrastructure into their research data management. So what benefits does the Samvera community get from us doing this work? The big things are that we're looking to produce some enhancements to Samvera, both through the RDSS framework and through various other bits of work in the Willow team. The big things that we're really missing from the UK perspective in Samvera are SORD 2 and OAI PMH support in Samvera specifically, as opposed to in Fedora. So we are partway through a SORD 2 implementation, and there will be an OAI PMH implementation at some point over the course of the next few months. We hope to bring those both back to the community. So we're also doing the admin side of looking at the CLA and getting ready to submit that back. Right, 1 minute warning. Okay.
Yeah, you actually 30 seconds.
30 seconds. All right. Okay. So we've been working on containerization as well. We're using Docker for all of our infrastructure. So we'll feedback some experience on that. And finally, we also want to raise the profile of Samvera in Europe. Historically, Samvera is very big in the US, and it's taken a bit more time to get some traction in Europe. So we're trying to do that through the Samvera Europe user group. We're giving presentations as much as we can. We're exposing it via the RDSS framework and offering it as a service, so being a vendor in Europe. So thank you for listening, and any questions? And please join the Samvera Europe user group.
Thank you so much. If people have questions, please put them in the Q&A box. I'm sorry I did rush you a little bit because the one before you went a little bit long. Sorry about that. Next up is integrating high latency storage with Samvera. Don Browser is giving a report.
All right, let's see here. All right, can everyone hear me? Good. All right, so I would like to talk about integrating high latency storage with Samvera. I should mention this is joint work with my colleagues here at Notre Dame. So it's like Jeremy Friesen, Mark Savecki, Larita Robinson, Banu, and Dan Brubaker-Horst. So we have we formally launched our institutional repository in Curate Indy in February 2015, and that was after about a year of development. So it's been around for a while. It uses the Curate gem. I think it's the last production application that uses the Curate gem. It also uses Fedora 3, and it's been chugging along. So in about 2015, our campus IT department provided us access to up to about 250 terabytes of tape storage, and we wanted to use it. The problem was that we needed to retrofit it to an existing our existing Hydra or Samvera application, and these applications, it assumes, like most, that every time it can access a file from Fedora, it's instantly available on demand. But the tape systems don't actually work like that, since they have to be able to physically move and grab tapes. That it can take a while to retrieve data. So this seemed like a difficult problem, and we wanted to try to do it without touching the code base as much as possible. So when we started the project, we set up some goals for this, which is we wanted to use tape for preservation storage. We want to integrate it, and we want to actually integrate it kind of tightly, so our patrons can grab things on demand from the tape system as needed. So we could actually store like video files and large data sets, and those could come out automatically. And then we also wanted to try to change as little as possible of our existing application. So just because just because. So we came up with a strategy that we would essentially make. I think this is a common strategy too. But there's nothing necessarily research level here, which is that we would make a preservation layer that would deal with the tape system and the other kind of preservation concerns, such as fixity checking and audits. And this layer
just sees a collection of bit streams, essentially. It has a very simple semantics. It does not care about anything really more complicated, such as RDF models or Fedora objects. We would use our batch system to put things on the tape. This kind of bypasses the web application, but that's okay. I'll come back to that. And then we'll make targeted changes to our application where needed so that we can accommodate the tape system. And so we weren't really sure where we would need to make changes, but we knew there would have to be some, and especially in the user interface. So the biggest problem, actually, well, not really a problem, but we had to figure out how this system would coexist with our Fedora installation. And that took a little bit of thought, but we maintain using Fedora as the object registry. So so essentially, like all code, it goes to Fedora as all working code essentially goes to Fedora for information about objects. All the metadata is still stored in Fedora, well, at least copies of the metadata in Fedora. And then we would use our data streams to point to the right URL. And for people who are not how to use Fedora 3, our data stream is basically just like, it just stands for redirect. It's just basically a URL, and it says that this content is actually someplace else. So, and then our tape manager system, as I said, it's very simple. It assigns, is essentially, since the tape system looks to us like a file system, it essentially assigns a URL to everything, and it actually acts as like a HTTP server, so it can serve out versions of the file. It does the fixed checking itself. It keeps a disk cache of everything stored on tape, which could seem redundant, but actually that makes sense, engineering sense, because our tape system only has a pass-through cache. It doesn't hold things on disk for a long time. And second of all, this way we can control our cache eviction policy, and we can alter it as needed to fit the demands of our content, which at the moment we have not really exercised that option, but we're still using a LR, at least recently used cache, but at least it's an option. And the tape manager also store, and then outside this tape manager itself, but we also decided that we'll store a serialization of every Fedora object on tape. Just, I mean, we don't, it's not a working copy, but we keep a copy there. So the rough architecture that we have kind of looks like this. And I was looking at these architecture diagrams, and everyone has arrows going every direction. So I have the same thing, arrows going every direction. It's roughly supposed to be, I guess, data flow, although it's not really clear. The things in red are the pieces that we made, and then the things in blue are the other standardized components. So in a download situation, first goes to the application. It determines using Fedora whether like the patron has authorization and to get the file, and if so, it actually goes back to Nginx as like a redirect request. Our proxy then it actually goes to Fedora first, because we still have some content that is still in Fedora. We haven't migrated everything out. We're waiting on that. And then from there, it either then pulls it from the tape library or just from Fedora directly. So there we go. That's the rough architecture. As far as the application itself, we didn't have to change too much, surprisingly. We added some stuff on the item show pages to display the cache status of items, so patrons know like how to expect downloads and a long download. I will show this in a minute. And same thing with this download waiting page. Probably the more technical change, which I'm not going to show today, but is kind of how, since the application expects to make edits directly to Fedora, it doesn't really help us. I mean, well, since we have where we consider the canonical copy on tape, so we have to have a way to move things back. And this also kind of fits to. There's also a kind of a disconnect between the application expects to make lots of small changes to Fedora objects as it makes things, but the tape system really prefers just to have like single batch updates. It doesn't like having lots of small changes. It likes having big changes, and then you just do it once. So this is kind of our way of coping with that. So when people make changes, they can make it all day, and then once a day we just move everything. We try to save back copies to tape. So, and then we got to turn off some of the background jobs because we don't need that anymore to happen in the application. so moving on, I want to show what the UI looks like. This is probably the most interesting part. So this is a normal show page, and it's kind of long, and it's normal. You have a title and just metadata. And what I want to look at is the file download section. So if we go to this detail, like if everything is cached, it looks just like it normally would. I think this is, I mean, this is not Hyrax, but eventually we'll get there. And it just looked like any other download page. We just have a download button, and you can just click it and get the files directly. If something is not in the cache and we need to pull it from tape, then we pull and we display a little note at the top of the list, which I don't know if anyone reads it. And then we change the download button to just say begin download, and it's a blue button. And this is probably not the best UI, but at least there's a distinction here. We also, so this is actually, it actually happens through a JavaScript call. We have an API endpoint that will ask, you can ask if any given file is in the cache or not. So the page itself actually alters itself depending on what's dynamically when you look at it. If you click on something waiting for it, we go to a waiting page, which looks like this. The system will request a file from tape, but then on this page there's some JavaScript that pulls, checking to see when it's there, and if it's there, it either start to download directly, or for some reason it didn't work, you will see a button saying manual download. Going into the future, we definitely intend to port some of this to Hyrax as part of our Hyrax migration, which we've just started talking about, and that's why we've been doing a lot of work on Hyrax for the last few months. We also intend to use Fedora 3 instead of Fedora 4 instead of Fedora 3. Although this is and I don't expect any problems there, since everything is a URL to move content around. And then the other open question is whether we can have a tape, whether there's a general thing here, and what the community, if this actually helps other people in the community, maybe we can make a more general API. So, all right, I want to thank you very much.
Thank you. Again, if people have questions, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of the frame on the Zoom screen. Next up for a lightning talk is Hannah Frost talking about a HiQ update.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Great. Okay, hi everybody. I'm Hannah from Stanford University, and I'm delighted to be here today to give you the latest about HiQ, the Hydra in a Box repository. If you've never heard of HiQ, I like to summarize it like this. For cultural heritage institutions who seek a way or a new way to manage their digital content, the HiQ repository builds on Hyrax in a single, easy to install, easy to configure, feature-rich solution for collections of all kinds, thus reducing barriers to effective and affordable content management and preservation. Our product offers next-generation web technologies and is supported by a vibrant and growing open source community. That's you all. So DuraSpace, DPLA, and Stanford had recognized the need for something like HiQ and proposed the project known as Hydra in a Box to the IMLS. And the three partners were successfully awarded a 30-month grant from IMLS, one focused on fostering a national digital platform through community-based repository infrastructure, components, and open source stewardship.
Hannah, I hate to interrupt you, but are you sharing your slides?
Yeah.
We're not seeing them.
Shall we try that again?
Awesome, thank you.
Sorry, there was one button I missed. I won't start over, but I will just show you the last slide because it's cute. Okay. So the project launched in May 2015, and so for over 2 years now, we've been working really hard, and the list of our accomplishments continues to grow. We've reported back to the community a lot about this work. I'm not going to detail it. If you're looking for details, please see our blog and demos at our project website, which is the URL is shown here. I will just highlight some of the most maybe things we haven't talked about as much or in some of the latest work. So with our partners at DPLA, one of our primary objectives was to do what we can do to take the aggravation out of aggregation. One obvious place to start was to build native support for DPLA's metadata application profile directly in Haiku, so that when a Haiku's object, when its metadata as published is harvested by DPLA, the crosswalk is just done. There's no fuss or more work required by the provider or the aggregator. At this point, we have just a little bit left work to do there related to publishing the attributes required by DPLA's aggregation class, but we expect to close that out so we can make that part of our project as smooth as possible. And as Mike mentioned earlier in the Hyrax update, we've implemented resource sync as a possible alternative to OAI PMH. We've done some testing with DPLA, and it's led to some really interesting results, which we've explained in detail in a blog post, as Mike mentioned. So I encourage you to read up on that. Other testing was the beta release that we recently conducted. It was over 5 weeks, beginning in the middle of May, leading right up to the Open Repositories conference last month. We really focused on the testing of our various deployment options, the application itself, and feedback on the growing body of user documentation. So in addition to all of the ticketed input that Mike mentioned, I want to give a shout out to Indiana University and co-sector at the University of London, who prepared and submitted valuable feedback to me as the product manager, and we're beginning to incorporate some of that feedback. As part of this, we also made significant improvements to the user documentation and the technical documentation, including a reorganization of the GitHub wiki. And so all of this input from our point of view, the beta test was a really big success. One goal of the test, of course, was to really test out how easy to install and maintain Haiku is. So we were looking at folks testing our various deployment options, which includes AWS and the CloudFormation templates, Docker Compose, Vagrant, and VirtualBox, or local bespoke deployments. So I won't go into all the details here in the interest of time, but we got a lot of good and important feedback on that, and have implemented some changes as a result. So what you may not know is we have a number of hosted service pilots underway. We had 38 institutions who responded to our solicitations of interest in
We lost your audio, Hannah.
I can still hear you, Hannah.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're fine.
Yes.
Okay, great. Not sure what happened there. The hosted service pilots are now underway. We have 6 institutions that are piloting. Arizona State Library, Archives, and Public Records, which of course is a government institution participating in DPLA. We have the Cleveland Public Library, which is a large municipal public library. St. Lawrence University, a small liberal arts school. The New Hampshire Digital Project, a regional collective which includes a number of institutions in and of itself. The PALSI Consortium, which is a regional membership-based consortium on the East Coast. And finally, the University of Miami, a medium-sized university. So these institutions were all motivated to participate because they're interested in being involved in DPLA. They're either starting up a greenfield repository or migrating from existing systems such as Content DM. So we're really excited about this work underway. In terms of engaging with them, it's going to be running basically through the end of our grant period, supported primarily by the folks at DuraSpace, Heather Greer-Klein and Bill Brannon. We're using this, of course, to gather feedback for improvements, and we'll be giving a complete report on the service pilot at Samvera Connect in November. As part of the launch of the service pilots, DuraSpace has launched a website, Haiku Direct, to talk about the plans for their hosted service. So if you haven't seen that, you should check that out. And so I just have a few animated GIFs here that Mike had made for our OR presentation. Again, I'll go through these quickly in the interest of time, but here's a demonstration of our multi-language support in the UI. Here's a quick view of all of the things you get through the consolidated dashboard of Haiku. And here is the metadata form where we're showing the licensing, the rights statement support, as well as the geo-named support when you enter in a value into the location field. And for the service providers of Haiku, we've made a dashboard for managing accounts when it's hosted in the cloud. So there's some really great features here if you're a service provider. Okay, Mike already mentioned a lot of the community members that have been developing and contributing directly to Haiku or Hyrax, and we're really grateful for their help. Looking ahead, we continue to have some UI designs underway and ready for implementation in Haiku. Here's a UI of a new homepage. And the works page, and there's ongoing work related to the collections pages as well, which is going on in the collections extensions working group, which we'll hear about a little bit later. Activities ahead. We're at Stanford, we're sort of beginning the transition out of full-on project mode and into life with Haiku after the Hydra in a Box project. We are beginning to lay plans to replace our self-deposit IR application known as Hydras. We are going to be replacing that with Haiku, and work will be starting up with that in just a matter of weeks now. And as Mike said, we're really interested in working with the community on a coordinated feature roadmap and community sprints. We have a number of high priority features just coming out of our project that we'd love to see reflected on that roadmap, as well as some of the work we'll be doing here at Stanford for our own purposes. The scope of our project was really big, and we did have to move some of the high priority things to the backlog. So that's why the community sprints are so important.
Hannah, are you almost done?
I am done. Here's my last slide. This is all the ways you can continue to stay informed of our work. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Hannah. That's a great report. Next up is DSpace to Samvera with Aaron Collier.
I assume you guys can see my slides?
Yes, we're there.
Okay. Okay, so this is an update on the DSpace to Samvera interest group that was formed about a year ago. A lot of this update actually will be around how the campuses involved have been, or the institutions involved have actually been progressing in their migrations. A little update on things that have come out of the interest group and where we've met in presentations. Leading up into Hydra Connect, we gave a short update lightning talk at Hydra Connect 2016. And there was a meeting towards the end of that conference where we laid out where we were able to lay out the requirements, the necessary requirements that would be sort of critical and must-have features within Hydra at the time, Hyrax, I think we were still in Sophia at the time, in order to migrate from DSpace. Steve Van Tile and I gave a quick lightning talk at LDCX, and then just recently at Open Repositories, I, with another colleague, gave a general track presentation as well as a developer track presentation on the tools that I'll talk a little bit about in a minute, that we've developed around migrating out of DSpace specifically, but can probably be used on other platforms or against other platforms. The group has been, in general, meeting, meeting monthly, although we've been on hiatus for the last couple of months as most of us are really deep in the work around actually getting migrations complete. So we haven't had a lot of time to meet around what we had done in the past, and we'll probably start reconvening soon to move forward with some next step items that I'll present in just a moment. So I mentioned that we define the requirements around what it would take to actually migrate from DSpace to Hydra, and really what that means is what features are available within the various Hydra applications that would allow a long-standing DSpace institution or DSpace using institution to function within a Hydra repository. The group itself, the work around that the group itself was performing was largely focused on actual data migration and what a metadata migration looked like, but we also wanted to inform the community on what features would be absolutely necessary for a working DSpace institution to accept Hydra as a repository platform. So those features which are outlined in the wiki, there's a lot more than this, but these are more of the critical ones. The biggest one when we first got rolling was mediated deposit, which, as you heard in Mike Giarlo's update, led into workflows and largely was the trigger point for those work sprints happening, because without mediated deposit, most DSpace institutions really couldn't migrate to a Hydra instance, as that's sort of the main feature or reason that they use things. Additionally, handles are largely used within DSpace institutions. Whether or not we make this actual handles or integration with the handle service or some other persistent URL, this seems to be quite a critical feature. SOAR depositing, there are a lot of institutions, or a significant number of institutions, that are working with service providers like ProQuest to actually deposit things like ETDs after they've been submitted through that service. So that workflow, that particular workflow process with a SOAR deposit is going to be critical. Clean migration tools that people can use without having to redevelop too much. As you heard before, nested collections, that's, for better or worse, a largely required feature from existing DSpace users. And then better statistics reporting, that comes from several different aspects. So one of the things that we've been largely focused on is the actual migration. And I say here, it takes a village. It really does. I have spent, and most of us that are in the midst of these migrations have largely spent the majority of our time with sort of metadata review, metadata migration, metadata profile planning, and so forth. And regardless of how closely we work together, all of our experiences really are mirrored. And the having the work group has been an immense benefit to answering a lot of the questions that we come up against and helping each other out in that process. Some of the tools that we've worked on that I've provided links later on as well to help anybody that is considering one of these migrations. I've developed an AIP packager that is pretty functional at this point for taking the standard DSpace export process, which is their prescribed backup and restoration process as an AIP package. I've taken that and developed an AIP packager gem that people can use to migrate the metadata. Oregon Digital has developed DSpace to Hydra as a bag implementation. I've been working on a SWORD server to address that concern. that is really in its earliest stages as far as that is concerned. And then additionally, some fairly rough migration tools for metadata assessment, sort of dashboard type tools for surfacing problems with metadata, trying to analyze metadata for data modeling and metadata assessment. We've got several sites that are going to be launched soon. CSU San Marcos is the first California State University institution that is now in production or pushing production. That is a site that's available that you can look at. The migration is actually still in progress, but we're trying to cut that over so they can stop using DSpace in the next several days. University of Michigan has a site that I believe is not quite accessible yet, but they're working on that. And then Oregon Digital, their site is not accessible to the public as of yet, but they have migrated close to 50% of their items already. So this work is progressing very well, and we are getting to the point where it is quite functional. So what's next? We'd like to document our workflow and sort of wrap this up into better tutorials and documentations so that we can share the experience and aid in future migrations, both in DSpace and in other platforms. Make the migration tools more deliverable, package our gems in a more robust way, and then also document the best practices that we've been following for metadata modeling from DSpace, which has got the ugly Dublin core issues, into something for Samvera, and share those data profiles, forms, etc., through some gem structure. Here are a bunch of links. I've shared the presentation in the program wiki, but here are a bunch of links to our pages for the working group, for our tools, and you can find some more of that stuff. And thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Our next presenter, our next and final lightning talk, is Realigning Avalon, David Schrober and Chris Colford.
Sorry. Hello?
Hello, go for it.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if everybody could hear me. Sorry. We're going to quickly, so this is David Schober, sorry. I'm the product owner of Avalon on the Northwestern side, and I'm here with Chris Kowald from Indiana University. He's the Avalon Community Technical Manager. We're going to give you a real quick overview about how we're moving Avalon to Hyrax, and sort of how and why we decided to do that. But first, a brief history about Avalon for those of you not familiar with it. It was one of the first Samvera solution bundles. It solved a core problem, which is how to deal with audio and video streaming in a repository context. But as those of you familiar with it know, it only focused on time-based media, which allowed us to grow very quickly, but we grew up alone. So our code base sort of grew up next to the rest of the modern code base, like curation concerns. We're currently in production around 8 institutions. We've been very lucky over the years to have some very generous grant funding. We're at the tail end of a Mellon grant, and we're just kicking off an IMLS grant, which a lot of this work is actually part of. So like a lot of big ideas, I think this one was popped at a pub during Hydra Connect last year. We were trying to solve the PCDM problem, largely how we were going to map Avalon data to PCDM. We were in the middle of migrating from Fedora 3 to Fedora 4, and someone during our conversation asked, well, what happens if we just base the whole thing on Sophia? And there was a moment of silence, and then we started talking about it and realized that this solved a lot of core problems that we were having. First of all, we realized it would quickly allow us to ease adoption as well as expand our developer base. It would allow Avalon to focus on breaking up our key components into smaller components so that they could be used in the rest of the Hyrax stack, and very quickly pay down technical debt. The first one, easing adoption, is that many institutions, we realized over the years, have a little bit of media. So what that means is that they may not want to stand up something like Avalon next to an existing institutional repository. It would just be way too much overhead. In addition, having a single repository base, so we realized basing it on Hyrax would allow our the technical team to only need to learn sort of one single core tech. And besides that, we realized developers contributing to Hyrax would quickly be able to get up to speed and contribute on Avalon, which was something that we have been trying to do for years. With that, I'm going to pass it off to Chris.
Thanks, David. So in choosing to base Avalon 7 on Hyrax, bringing down Avalon into components, we hope to make Avalon useful to a larger audience, and the components generic and useful enough outside of an Avalon application context within a more general Hyrax context. So as we're going about breaking these down, we're having to kind of assess where these pieces will land, whether they land within a Hyrax core or Samvera core gems, whether they better live as Hyrax plugins or AV concerns work type, or if they're really kind of custom Avalon stuff. So our plan is to break these down. Some work has already started, and then when we get to releasing Avalon 7, we'll bundle these all back up again. Hyrax core, all of our plugins, the AV concerns work type, and any customizations, and still deliver that as an Avalon turnkey solution. So some of these components that we're thinking of breaking out are pieces that are really unique to Avalon, starting with our focus on audiovisual materials. So the player, derivative generation, and streaming delivery. So with the player, Avalon has been contributing to the IIIF AV working group, and a proof of concept player was demoed at the IIIF conference at the Vatican. And we'll be continuing to track and contribute to the IIIF AV working group and updating our player as that spec evolves. For derivative generation, Avalon developed active encode to kind of abstract away our transcoding backend from our code so we could swap out and to meet the needs of different institutions needing different backends for doing derivative generation. Active encode has had a PR merged into Hydra derivatives, adding support for it. Included with that is instructions for using it with Amazon Elastic Transcoder. For streaming delivery, if you're using Amazon Elastic Transcoder, it makes sense you'd want to use Amazon CloudFront for delivery. And so we want to enable that, as well as other streaming servers that might be set up as kind of common institution infrastructure. What's key in this is that we're looking at externally stored derivatives and stream level authorization of those. Other components, playlists, so we have some support in Avalon 6. We're hoping to make that more generic, maybe based on the IIIF presentation API. And then leases, batch ingest, bulk actions, and finally LTI support for integration with learning management systems like Canvas. So these are kind of things, components we want to help make more accessible to Hyrax, but we're also hoping to pay down a lot of technical debt in the switch to Hyrax. As David said, we kind of grew up alongside Sophia and creation concerns, and we have a lot of kind of infrastructure we're owning ourselves, and we're hoping to switch over to more community supported stuff so we can contribute and we can make use of the contributions of others. And in doing so, focus on our core strengths, AV, and also improving our code by being forced to adopt standards and best practices laid out within Samvera core gems. And last but not least, we hope to have more developer involvement. By breaking things out into components, we hope that it's more attractive and useful to others, that you can jump in and help with development effort as well as maintenance, and that Avalon can become better as a result. So all of this work is funded by an IMLS National Leadership Grant that David mentioned. It started this month and will continue for 2 years. And other objectives in this are piloting the cloud-based solution and a focus on preservation, including integration with Archivematica. So with that, if anyone has questions, you can contact us or use the Q&A feature within Zoom. We'll continue to answer as the Virtual Connect continues. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. That's great. So that concludes our lightning talks. Next, we're going to be hearing very short reports from the interest and working groups. And to start off, we have the newspaper interest group with Evan English.
Hi, everyone. I assume that someone is about to bring up the slides for the combined interest group working group presentation. So I'll just wait for that to come up. Or actually, I'll just get started. So the newspaper's interest group formed after the most recent Hydra Connects. And we're getting to my slides right now. Yay. So the goal of this group is basically just to provide a forum for institutions that are interested in managing digitized newspaper content within Samvera Fedora-based systems, and to kind of come up with some community consensus around data models, metadata fields, representing Metsalto and Fedora and Solar, and also to talk about migration patterns and pathways for content. So basically what we've been focusing on so far is just trying to get a sort of community-approved PCDM data model for newspaper content at sort of all levels, from the series issue level to down to an article level, and to develop a requirements list for newspaper ingest management applications. And one more thing I should add is that they're all a sort of peripheral development to this group is the IMLS-funded grant project, Newspapers in Hydra, which is being administered by BPL and the University of Utah. And basically the goal of that is to create a set of gems to allow you to ingest and manage newspaper content in Samvera haiku-based applications. Can I get the next slide? So since Connect, we've been looking at PCDM modeling, looking at a couple of proposed community models, creating a features and requirements list, and creating a metadata requirements list. Those are available on the wiki. And coming up next, we're mostly looking at prioritizing that feature list and trying to flesh that out a bit more. We're happy to get more use cases added to that, and reviewing kind of proposing a PCDM profile and reviewing that as community, looking at modeling metadata as RDF, and reviewing the development of our grant project, which just started on July 1st. And that's it.
Thank you so much. Next up is User Experience Interest Group.
Hi, this is Jen at Cornell. Hopefully it's working. And the UX group meets the third Tuesdays of the month at 2 o'clock Eastern. We're on the Slack at UX Interest Group. Since the last Connect, the big thing that we've done was the distributed usability testing. Ben Howell at Michigan organized that, and we had 5 institutions participate. We reported back on a Hydra Tech call, but we're hoping to do a bigger report back at the next, at the Connect this fall. And we're also starting to talk with repo managers about how we might do another one of those. We're still meeting monthly, hoping to give people a forum to show their designs. If they have interactions they're working on and they want some in-person feedback and talking rather than just GitHub comments, we can provide that for people. I've already, oops. Oh, can you flip the slide? We're trying to get more involved on GitHub. Mike gave us control over the UX advisors group, which was great of him. And we're continuing to think about how to share the UX that we're doing locally back to the larger community, and how we can sort of document UX patterns for everyone, so we can all understand what's best practice, and to make sure that usability and accessibility are being considered throughout the development cycle. So that's us. And we could use another coordinator. So if you're into UX and like organizing meetings, let me know. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Next is repository management interest group.
And this repository management group has a history of redefining itself. It used to be project management group plus service management group. And now it's called repo managers, because recently, actually last Hydra Connect, the project management and service management interest group was combined together. And Amy and I were chairing that. And recently Julie and Leah suggested that it would be good to add more repo managers to this. And we redefined this as repository management interest group. We meet every fourth Wednesday of the month at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The next meeting is on next Wednesday, July 26th at 1 p.m. The Slack channel is Repo Managers, so please do join us. The things we talk about is mostly what are the features and how can we collaborate on those features. And also we talk about different project management tools and service management tools. So previous meetings, we shared project management tools and some of the service management challenges. And going forward, we hope to be more inclusive to all different kinds of management tasks. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Next is the metadata interest group.
Hi, this is Ruth Tillman. Can you hear me? Julie Hardesty and I are the co-chairs of the metadata interest group. Since the last Connect, we've changed to meeting monthly at the end of the month, last Tuesday of the month. We've started doing demos. So we've demoed the Avalon system and some mods RDF mapping, as well as JSON LD export. We're looking at a project coming up to improve metadata documentation, essentially collecting the kinds of metadata that exist out there, how people are doing their metadata, and then looking at what's going to be coming up in Hyrax and Haiku, how you can create your own local profiles and what other people are doing. And actually, I realized it didn't make it to the slides, but Mike Giarlo added a group for metadata, I think with Christina Harlow's suggestion on the Samvera GitHub. And so now we can be tagged in as a group, and anybody can join, anybody interested in metadata can join in and get flagged when a question about metadata development coming up arises. So we had some conversations on the Slack, but this was a way to bring it into the GitHub environment. And we've been trying an experiment where people report in from other kinds of interest groups, working groups. We've been calling it moles, and we just say, is anybody here that's also on, say, the geospatial interest group and such. Next slide. So coming up, we are looking at a new rewrite of the interest group's goals and purposes. That was sent out just to the metadata Google group and posted on the metadata channel in the Slack. I can post it there again after this. It's looking at larger goals because this had been spawning off a bunch of working groups, so we want to figure out where we want to go next. Do we want to create more working or exploration groups? We want to see about scheduling time to work on this documentation and again, conduct more demos. So I'll put that link in the Slack.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Next is Hyrax Analytics Working Group.
Hey, so this is Steve from Oregon State University, the organizer, I guess, of the Hyrax Analytics Working Group. So what have we done since the last Connect? Well, we actually started the working group probably about a month and a half ago or 2 months ago. The goal of the group is to build out some of the analytics and reporting functionality in Hyrax for the needs of quite a few institutions. So we have been identifying user stories and distilling those into kind of broad categories of need and requirements, and have just started prioritization of those requirements and needs so that we can do the next thing, which is on the next slide. So what we're up to coming soon, and hopefully completing this by the end of the summer, is to complete a draft of prioritized requirements and submit those to the community for feedback. And then we plan to finalize those milestones and then start to work on design, some design work. So that's where the analytics group is right now, and we'd be happy to have more participants. You can find us on the Samvera wiki.
Thanks. And next is the URI Selection Working Group.
Hi, this is Ryan Wick from Oregon State University. So the URI Selection Working Group came about after the URI Management Working Group ended to continue having an infrastructure for allowing the community to request new predicates. So as more and more folks move to RDF and are scanning available controlled vocabularies and ontologies out there, maybe finding things that there's gaps or they need something new created or need help in maybe the analysis of what works and what doesn't. And there's also the predicate decision tree that was created in the URI management working group. So kind of continuing on that work. So we have a GitHub repo for the team and have an issue template for if someone was to do a submission of a new predicate. And we already have one submission. Thanks very much to Ruth for being the inaugural. Go ahead and do the next slide. So upcoming activities is to put out a formal call for community submissions, and that should be going out very soon. And then the group will work to review the incoming submissions, and then work with the Samvera steering and others on implementing a community vocab manager, and again, actually having the URIs and predicates we do resolve and be useful to others. And that's about it.
Great, thank you so much. The next report is the Data Mapping Working Group.
Hi all, this is Trey from Princeton. So the Data Mapper Working Group started just recently with two big goals. The first goal is write a library, which has been referenced a couple times here, called Valkyrie. The goal of the library is to enable support for multiple different backends, both for metadata storage and for file storage, largely in response to multiple institutions either wanting to store their files in various places or wanting to experiment with new metadata stores, whether it's for performance reasons or distribution of data or a whole variety of other things. So we need an easy way to do that, but still have all of our code that sits in things like controllers and jobs like that look the same, but have each of the adapters be enabled just by a configuration so that you can easily switch and you can implement new ones using a well-defined interface with tests. The second piece of the project is to actually use those libraries to build a minimum viable product repository, something that's relatively easy to work on and doesn't have the large history of Hyrax behind it that we can quickly see if this kind of stuff will actually work for the harder use cases. And if it does or doesn't work, to output a report on what our discoveries were and which specific roadblocks we ran into while we were working on it. Currently, the library supports Fedora, Postgres, Solr, and in-memory for metadata storage, on disk, in-memory, and Fedora for file storage. We have run one sprint, which you can see the summary of at that bit.ly link that's right there. And it's gone very well so far. The majority of the use cases that we've talked about and gathered from the members of the group have been suitably solved. There's just a couple more and some larger architectural problems to get through. Can you move to the next slide, please? We'll probably run at least 2 more sprints, and then we'll write a recommendation for implementation in the Samvera stack, and we are scheduled to sunset by November 2017 with a final report at Samvera Connect. If you want to join, we meet every Thursday at 2 o'clock Eastern, and you can meet us in the Valkyrie channel. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that update. Next up is Applied Linked Data Interest Group.
Hi, everyone. I am Anna Headley, coordinating the Applied Linked Data Interest Group. We have monthly calls where we share updates on local work, provide feedback on designs and implementations in progress, and coordinate our vision and efforts to move linked authority data tools into the shared Hyrax stack. Next slide. Recent and ongoing discussions have focused on enhancements to the LDF gem. We're working on using LDF to cache external authorities in local triple stores. Currently working out generalizable configuration strategies and expiration schemes. Another use for LDF is mirroring remote data entirely. Our members have been working on questioning authorities as well, implementing linked data endpoints and integration with LDF for caching data received from QA. And we're having ongoing discussions about related UI work to provide more context for users who work with metadata when they are selecting authority terms. So please join us if you're working on these or related topics and would like to coordinate with others. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Next one is Documentation Working Group.
Hi, my name is Beth Sadler. I'm at Data Curation Experts, and I am one of the participants in the Documentation Working Group. Our primary goal is to improve the quality and coverage of the documentation within the Samvera community. Initially, we're focusing on documentation for the software development community, but we've had a lot of people approach us about establishing patterns for other kinds of documentation too, and we're really interested in having those conversations. We do write some actual documentation, but a lot of our efforts are around establishing patterns for managing documentation effectively. So we've done a lot of research with what groups like Write the Docs do. We're trying to adopt best patterns for documentation management, like keeping documentation in version control, going through a PR process, having it tied to specific versions of the code. We meet regularly to identify and prioritize needed documentation within the Samvera community, and we talk regularly with developers. In some cases, we are the developers, but just to try to keep channels of communication open between people who are writing documentation and people who are using it or producing the code that we're documenting. And we have done a lot this year around establishing a publication system. Mike Giarlo mentioned it earlier at samvera.github.io, and making it easier to request documentation when you identify a place where it's needed. Next slide, please. some of our goals in the next year are to improve and build out the features for samvera.github.io. If you haven't been in a while, you should go and look at our new A to Z index of all of the topics. It makes it much easier to navigate. We want to improve the onboarding for developers who are new to the Samvera community. We want to tackle some specific content, like we've identified already code patterns, best practices, and an accessibility features guide. And we want to expand our documentation into guides for how to run Samvera with a focus on Hyrax in production. Through our talks with the community, we're hearing that that's the place where there's a real pain point. There's very little guidance out there about how to run as a production service. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next is Collection Extensions Working Group.
Yes, this is Lynette Rail at Cornell. I'm the coordinator for this group. It's actually been a series of a couple of working groups. The first working group was focused on identifying use cases and requirements, and the second working group, which is near its completion, is doing the mock-ups for the UIs. I just wanted to give a brief understanding of some of the features that the collection extensions is going to be bringing in. One of the things we identified very early is that the various use cases that we have are, on some level, have similar requirements, but they can at times be incompatible. So having a one-size-fits-all really wasn't working. So to give you an idea, some of the use cases we have are user collections, which already exist, where their primary purpose is for a general user to organize content that they deposit. We also had a use case for exhibits, where there would be select staff who curate a collection of works into a publicly viewable exhibit. And then there's also the use case of migrated data from applications like DSpace. And in that case, having a nested structure is a fairly critical component of that process. And then there's just general nesting use cases as well, often around institutional organizations, like you might have a university collection with schools underneath that, and then departments underneath that. And there were actually a number that fell into the nesting use cases, but that just gives you an idea. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the requirements that we are putting in. So coming from the varied use cases, what we decided to do was to go with configurable collection types. So a site can define any collection type that they want. So those use cases I mentioned are common ones, but you can have your own use case at your institution and do that configuring yourself. And there are a number of configurations that are on-off. So you can say, I want this collection type to be able to be nestable, or I don't. And the same thing, I want this works that are going into collections of a particular type to be able to go into any number of collections of that type, so the multiple membership. And also you can say whether or not you want them to be discoverable. And you can say, I want to be able to do a role-based sharing with these collections. So for a user collection, you might say, I'm the only person who really can work with this collection. But if you're doing a curated team, you might want to identify managers and depositors and viewers for that collection in a way that's quite similar to the way admin sets do that. And additionally, there's a couple of other roles at the collection type level where you can say, I have a manager of that collection type who can do pretty much anything for any collection.
Lynette, you need to wrap up.
Okay, just go to the next one. And I just wanted to point out that we are entering the phase of the sprints, and the organization's happening now, and the first sprints are starting August 7th. And if this is work that you're interested in, I encourage you to sign up. Most of the sprints are virtual, but there will be one in-person sprint the week of August 21 through 25.
Great, thank you so much. Next up is the Content DM Migration Group.
This is Aaron Collier again. So this is a relatively new group that was formed shortly after LDCX this year. The goal of this group is to identify the tools that will help and facilitate the kind of repository type exhibit displays that are found in Content DM. After sort of the DSpace migration and other migrations, Content DM has been one of the platforms that has surfaced to the top as attractive for migration into a Samvera type platform. We're working on, again, this is because it's such a new group, we've only met a couple of times so far, and we are working on the use cases for harvesting and migrating Content DM items into Haiku and Hyrax. The interested members so far are Temple, University of Houston, University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, Penn State, California State University, IUPUI, Stanford, and Oregon Digital. And the next slide, please. So right now, again, we're a very new group, so we're just getting off the ground. We meet the first Wednesday of each month via Zoom, and our current targeted deliverables are recommended libraries and tools to retrieve item data and metadata via the Content DM APIs, documenting the patterns for migration and publishing retrieved content from Content DM in Haiku or Hyrax, and what kind of Haiku and Hyrax presenters will provide sort of the feature parity between our platform and an existing Content DM installation. So really quick update as this is just getting off the ground. But so if you're interested, this is when we meet. We're on the wiki and you can find us there.
Thank you so much. And our final working group update is Samvera plugins.
Hi, this is Andrew Myers from WGBH. Coming out of last year's Hydra Connect was the plugins working group. It was Hydra at the time. And the problem that we were trying to solve was filling the void of where there is a lack of documentation and how-to and guidelines when developing separate components to plug into a Hyrax application. So that's what we set out to do. We've been calling them guidelines, but you can think of them as sort of maybe a specification or how-to or things like that. And then the other goal of the working group was to actually put some of those guidelines to the test on actual projects. The initial, well, we met for about 6 months since last year, and so the working group has since ended. And the one thing that has come out of that is a first draft of the plugins, which is available in GitHub. Next slide, please. And when we took some of those guidelines from the first draft and applied it to the Geo Concerns project, we made some progress there. Geo Concerns ended up moving a little bit of its architecture while we were trying to work on it, which is something that often happens in this community, I think. But in the meantime, as GBH and Indiana University's collaboration project called FIDO moves forward, we've been exploring new places to apply these same guidelines to 2 different plugins. One that we're calling Hyrax Preservation, which provides some preservation modeling, mainly premise events. And then we're also working on an ingest plugin that kind of uses a declarative syntax in YAML to specify the conditions and procedures for an ingest. And it uses active Fedora right now. So we're moving forward on those. Now, while the working group has ended, there are a couple of things left to wrap up, which I'm hoping to get completed before Connect, the next Hydra Connect. And that is finish up the second draft of the guidelines with some community feedback incorporated therein. Add the guidelines to the samvera.github.io website, which is the new developer documentation website. Write up a final report on the working group that can be presented at the Hydra Connect or Samvera Connect. And have our current plugins that we're using for FIDO be demoable at Samvera Connect. So there's going to be a few opportunities for me to wrangle in some of the members of the working group. So can look forward to that. And that's all I got. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all for your participation and for the panelists and for the attendees. And we hope to see you all in Evanston in November. There will be an email going out to everybody for a survey to get your thoughts on how this went and what you thought and to get suggestions for the next one. So thank you all very much. And that's it. Yay. On time. Woo.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you for everybody who organized this.